There's a, I think, deep instinct that is sewn into the human condition, which feels unburdened, purified by confession. And as you note in the lecture, there are many traditions that have the infrastructure of confession, but what's unique about the Jewish tradition, as you present it here, is that confession is made to a personal God. And I wonder if there's a relationship between this losing touch with the fear and the awe that infuses these days, these Yamim Noraim, these days of awe, and this ability for us to confess.
So what's interesting is, as valuable as confession might be psychologically to a therapist, or as cathartic as a Catholic might find, and I'm not going to presume to judge their religious experience or analyze it, I might find confession to a priest. Judaism does never mandate and often prohibits confession to another person. It does not say you should confess sins to a man, to a human being. Even in the temple, when one would bring a sacrifice for a sin one had performed, one would say confession over that sin offering, but one would not say it to the Kohen. One would not say it to the priest. One was not supposed to say it to the priest. And it's described in Talmud Test how you would say it in a way that the Kohen would not hear. He knows you're bringing a sin offering, but it's none of his business what precise sin you're bringing for. Sometimes that's impossible, but usually that's the case. In Yeshiva University, there was a Purim spiel, a Purim play, called The Nosy Kohen, which was all about a guy bringing a sacrifice to the temple, and like the Kohen would be like, "Oh, what'd you do?" You know. But we don't. You're not supposed to have that. The Kohen is there to represent God in certain ways, but not in terms of confession. Confession is between me and God. There is certainly a cathartic element to it, but the cathartic element is not meant to be the purpose. The cathartic element is the result, ideally, of what repentance is meant to achieve, which is atonement, purification in the truly religious sense, and self-creation in the way that I've described. So what's interesting is that Judaism has never, ever known confession to, in a cultic way, to a priest or a prophet. It's never had that. Confession is between you and God. Now, confession, when it comes to sins between man and man, ways that you've wronged somebody, there we have a form of confession. The form of confession is asking for forgiveness. You need to go to another person if you've wronged them, and say, "I've done such and such. Please forgive me." That's when you've actually wronged somebody. And there, by the way, just as with God, there's a personal element to it. It's the same thing, right? I can't just send an email to you and say, "Sorry about this terrible thing I did to you. Hope you'll forgive me." Again, when I was in college, this was during the age of movie phone. You remember movie phone? Okay. So, the movie you have chosen is Die Hard 2. If you know the theater you'd like to see it in, press 1, right? So they had this around Rosh Hashanah one time they had somebody did on the computer in the early age of the internet called Mechila phone, which means forgiveness phone. Now you're supposed to go to people you have wronged and ask them for forgiveness. But the idea was instead you would just have a robotic phone do it for you. So someone would get a call and say, "Hello, you have reached, this is Mechila phone. You have received a Mechila call from Meir Soloveichik. He would like you to forgive him for saying really nasty things about you behind your back. If you forgive him, press 1." Right? Okay. So, why doesn't that work? Because then we'd all do that, right? It's hard to face-to-face. Now, if a person doesn't know that you've wronged him, and that may actually damage the relationship, there's all sorts of discussions by the rabbis whether you should do it or not. But if you know there's wrong, you've got to go face-to-face and say, "I've done this. We both know I've done this. Please forgive me." With God, it's the same thing. It's just that with God, we're supposed to be feeling the personal intimacy that you and I can have talking face-to-face. It's just much harder. It's just much harder to achieve. But you're not supposed to do it through another human being, because the intimacy that you have with another human being, you can have that with God for Judaism. You can have it in an even more profound way. That's the countercultural idea at the heart of the Days of Awe.